Hello whisky fans and happy St George's Day. I would bet that probably a lot of international viewers, as well as some English viewers, might not have been aware that today even is St George's Day, because it doesn't really have the international presence of something like St Patrick's Day, and even here in England we tend not to really celebrate it. St George is the patron saint of England, as well as a lot of other places and a lot of other things, and a great excuse to drink some great English whisky. So today I'm going to be looking at this one, which is a fairly new release. This is the English Sherry Butts. So by the English, that's what they're actually branding themselves as now. It's the specific English whisky distillery in Rydham in Norfolk. And it seems like these days they've finally given up on the chaptered releases. These days English Whisky Company have got their original and smoky 43% sort of mass market entry level releases. It seems like everything else they do now tends to be in this style box, and it's all small batch release, which is great. And the latest one that they've done is this Sherry Butts. So first things first, let's have a look at the presentation, which I really like. So start off with the box. Really nice looking box design, no holes or anything. It's kind of along the lines of the 11-year-old release that came out from the English Whisky Distillery probably about a year and a half ago, but that was in the yellow box. Same style but different colour. I think all of these new ones tend to be in the white colour scheme. I do really prefer these solid, fully enclosed boxes to the old ones though. I've got a few of the older English whisky releases from my shelf here. This isn't my full collection of English whisky because I've got quite a lot, but these are some of the older ones that I still have. And these old box designs always drove me crazy. Springbank are guilty of this as well. Boxes that have holes in them that don't protect the whisky. If you're transporting a bunch of these and you've got a big piece of glass exposed, the box is not really doing its job, and they tend to get dusty, and you have to be careful where you store them. Because if you've got a bunch of these on your shelf, any that are on the front row, you end up having to store them sideways so that the sun doesn't get to them. So, in my opinion, this style of old Springbanky and English Whisky Company box, it's naff. They also had this weird little deck in the top. Faffy little things. I'm not a fan of things like that. I did quite like the bottle style that they went with. When was this bottled? This is 2015 they had this style. I did quite like that this bottle with the sort of sharp shoulder at the top. Quite like that design, better than the original ones that they were using. But I don't know if you can see that bottle's all dusty because it's not in an enclosed box. For long-term storage, absolutely not ideal. Also the labels that they used to use. To their credit, all the information is there, everything that matters is there, the label does its job. But I think you'll probably agree, significantly more amateur than what they're doing now. Much more stylish, cleaner, much nicer. As for the actual bottle that this stuff comes in now, as I said, I did like the old style bottle, or the previous style bottle, but these bottles that they're using now, almost decanters, lovely wide stopper on the top, lovely wide neck, pours incredibly well. I like old style, slightly dumpy, compact, retro style bottles and packaging. I do like that a lot, and I think this one will probably end up as an infinity bottle or something like that after it's empty. What's not good, especially in contrast to the old bottlings, is that these new releases, they don't say natural colour or non-chill filtered anywhere on the label, or the box, or even on the website. Now, if you sent an email or made a phone call to English Whisky Distillery, I'm 99% sure that they'd say that it is natural colour and non-chill filtered, which is great because most of their stuff normally is, and it tells you. But a statement that promises that it is at the time that you're talking to them is really not good enough. There's now a growing list of distilleries who did offer a craft presentation that have kind of gone back on that and either reintroduced colouring or reintroduced non-chill filtration. Glendronach famously did it, and Ardmore did it as well. I'm sure I speak for a lot of whisky enthusiasts when I say that we like to give our money to whisky distilleries that present their whisky in an honest craft presentation way, and we like to withhold our money from distilleries that don't offer that. Craft presentation is extremely important in whisky, now that it's becoming a much more serious thing. A growing percentage of whisky drinkers are really interested in what's in the bottle. It's not just seen as a way to get pissed anymore. And equally important as the actual craft presentation is the fact that they actually tell us and commit to it, and they have a guarantee on the label that says that this is beyond a doubt craft presentation. We really don't want to have to be wondering or phoning up and asking distilleries if they're still doing the craft presentation that they verbally agreed to, or if they're another one of these distilleries that's gone back on their word. We don't want to have to do that. So a little bit of a shame that English Whisky Distillery have taken a little bit of a step backwards on that one, especially when you consider, so I'll just get this old bottle here. Not that old, bottled in 2015. This is actually around about a 5-year-old sherry cask matured English whisky, funnily enough. 650 bottles produced. Back in these days, I get the feeling that they probably weren't selling as much because they were very, very limited runs back then, and they were quite available for quite a long time. But on this old bottling, this one in particular, you can see low down on the label, on this side next to my finger, you've got natural colour. On that side, you've got non-chill filtered. Not an age statement on this bottling, but they go even better than that. They tell you when it was distilled, October 2010, and it was bottled in September 2015. 46%. So this is a full 100% craft presentation. I really hope that English Whisky Distillery, maybe if we get on their case a bit, they'll be tempted to put those details back on the bottle. Because I'm sure they probably are still offering a craft presentation, but it doesn't matter if they are or not, we need to know. So the details that we have got on the label for this one, it is slightly humorously called the English Sherry Butts. That is the name that they've gone for. And we know that it's filled, so actually put into the cask, in November 2013. This is batch 01-2022. And the date bottled is February 2022, so this hasn't actually been in the bottle for that long, and it's a limited edition run of 2,850 bottles. We also know, we don't know if it's natural colour or non-chill filtered, but they've chosen to tell us that it has a phenol level, so smokiness, of NA, non-applicable. So this is an unpeated whisky, because English Whisky Distillery, when they set up, they actually got Ian Henderson from Lefroy to come and be sort of technical advisor when they were setting their distillery up. And they make some cracking peated whiskies, really good stuff, but this isn't one of them. Another thing that I really like to see on the label is that it says matured in sherry butts. So not finished in, we're led to believe this is a full-term maturation in some sherry butts. And the fact that it says sherry butts rather than sherry cask leads us to believe that this is going to be a proper European sherry butt rather than a sherry seasoned ASB cask or hogshead. So from those dates on there, that it was filled in 2013 and bottled this year, we know that it's just over 8 years old. So it's not an old whisky, but English Whisky Distillery has not been there for a very long time. They've been there since 2006, so this is reasonably old considering that they are kind of still a newish distillery. So that's about all of the details that I can give you. Let's get some in the glass and see what it's like. So, English Whisky Sherry Butts on the nose. So first things first, really pleased to say that this is not your typical cask finished, flavour dipped sherry bomb. It's not overly sweet. This is sherry matured whisky done properly. Getting some really nice notes of chocolate on the nose, a little bit of raisin, some sweet and sour grape. There's also a lovely effervescent quality to this one. So that chocolate and the grape, it has a really lively, fizzy experience on the nose. Also some really nice bitter cocoa powder notes in there. And over time, as you give this some time to breathe in the glass and you really go into it and appreciate it, you get a growing note of orangey maltiness on the nose of this whiskey. Let's see how it tastes. You would think 8 years in a fresh sherry butt, probably natural colour. And I have tried adding some water into this. I don't think it needs it, and I'm not tasting this with water, but for how hazy it gets when you add water, probably is non-chill filtered. But we really shouldn't have to guess. There's no need. But on the palate, lovely, equally pleasant experience to the nose, some really nice milk and dark chocolate notes, some really nice chocolate orange, another very British tasting note here, getting a little bit of a flavour of Ovaltine on the palate, so that's kind of, again, a slightly chocolatey flavour, Ovaltine, with a strong core of maltiness, and late on the palate, unsurprisingly, you're getting some really pleasantly bitter European oak. One more sip and look at the finish. Really nice that it's not overly, cloyingly sweet. This is how sherry matured whiskey should be. As for the finish, medium long, ever so slightly light, but lots of sweetened cocoa and a pleasant bitterness on the end of the finish. I think that with European oak, there is a fine line between a pleasant bitterness and too much, especially if you leave a whiskey in a European oak cask, a fresh European oak cask for a very long time. It's easy for that whiskey to pick up too many tannins, too much bitterness from that cask, because European oak is very different to American white oak. But when it comes to that fine line, this whiskey is definitely on the right side of that line. I think that English whiskey, it's been around for going up for 2 decades now, and it used to be a very new and exciting thing. I would say that's no longer the case, because now it's just exciting, because a lot of distilleries in England, English whiskey included, obviously including Bimber and the Cotswolds, they're getting to a point now where they're really coming of age and they are ready, for want of a better word. Definitely including this new expression from the English Whisky Company, which I'd say is an obvious, clear step up from some of their earlier releases. If I had to compare this whiskey to something else that I've had, something else that some of you might have had, I'm going to say that it reminds me quite a lot of the Glenallachie 10-year-old cask strength. But I would actually say that this probably, because this is only 46% ABV, and I think that this stuff works much better at 46% than the Glenallachie does. If you add a lot of water to the Glenallachie and bring it down to this strength, it falls apart quite a bit, and I think this works much better. I do really like the 10-year-old cask strength from Glenallachie. I think it's a really good whiskey, and if you can find it for the original retail price, it's well worth buying. But I'm actually going to go out there and say that I think that this is a better whiskey than the Glenallachie 10. It's just my personal opinion, but I really like that this has more presence of the malt. It's much more focused on the malt and the barley, and the fact that this is whiskey. I think it's that little bit more mature and a little bit more complex than the Glenallachie, and it's not all completely dominated by that sweet sherry. I think that it would have been really nice if there was a cask strength offering of this whiskey, and if it was available for a slightly higher price, I'd have probably bought a cask strength as opposed to this 46%. But I think that this English Whisky Sherry Butts still works really well at 46%, which is probably something that I wouldn't say about the Glenallachie. For any of you that like to do your home blending like I do, I think this is also an excellent candidate for mixing with a heavily peated whiskey. I've had a little bit of a play with this, and I think that mixing this with maybe some heavily peated South Shore Isla whiskey, you can get some really nice kind of Ugadal style whiskies out of this. And to their credit, English Whisky Distillery have made some heavily peated, heavily sherried releases in the past, and I think that they've worked incredibly well as well. So me personally, as a self-confessed peat head, I do kind of wish that there had been at least a little bit of peat in this one. But saying that, that's probably something that they're going to do again in the near future. And in a way, I am glad that this non-peated expression exists, because it's really great stuff in its own right. As for a grade, I thought about this for a very long time, and it's only just scraped in, but I'm going to go for an A- with this one. I think that it's a really good whiskey and I highly recommend it, especially if you're looking for a recommendation on a good English whiskey for about the £60-65 mark, and especially if you're one of the people who's been raving about the Glenallachie 10 cask strength. I think this is a very good alternative. Thanks for watching. If you've been fortunate enough to try this one, let me know what you think, and what are your recommendations for good English whiskey in 2022. Thanks for watching, and cheers.